there, Bronze Age believers. This video centers on photo opportunities with comic creators at conventions. But before we get into that, if you're new to the channel, please feel free to click subscribe for more comic book and collecting content. You know what to do if you enjoy what you watch by now, so smash that like button. I love going to cons and traveling when I can, to of course buy collectibles, but for the past 5 years or so I've been taking advantage of meeting various pop culture icons and celebrities, if you will, that I admire. So here's a look at a few of my favorites. I'll go ahead and do this alphabetically, which just so happens brings me to the top of the comic mountain with Neal Adams. Neal was only my second photo op I'd ever asked for, so I was super nervous to meet him, but as you can see, it all went well. He invited me to sit down, and we talked about his work on my favorite characters, including Green Arrow, Deadman, and of course, Batman, who he collaborated on with the recently departed Denny O'Neil. Neal's work is legendary throughout comics, and this was truly a great moment for me. Next up, something a bit more modern, the team of Ryan Stegman and Donny Cates on the current run of Venom for Marvel. Stegman is totally crushing it on the pages of this book, and Cates, well, I feel like there isn't a book he's not writing sometimes. If I try to list them all, I'm sure to miss some, but I've enjoyed his work on Cosmic Ghost Rider, his short run on Guardians of the Galaxy, and my new favorite, Thor Volume Whatever. Thor as the new Herald of Galactus, fending off the Black Winter, has been epic so far. Speaking of writers, author and comic scribe Peter David has an incredible pedigree, which includes Star Trek novels, turning Aquaman into a badass with a spear for a hand, and a monumental 12-year run on the Incredible Hulk. On the Hulk, he worked with a ton of great artists, including some guy named Todd McFarlane. Maybe you heard of him? David is still active in comics with a recent symbiotic Spider-Man series and the return of the Maestro in the Marvel Universe. Another scribe I have come to admire is Fabian Nicieza. Perhaps most famous as the co-creator of Deadpool with Rob Liefeld in the pages of New Mutants, Nicieza has penned some classic outings for the X-Men, the debut of the original New Warriors, and his continued work with Liefeld on X-Force, which is what New Mutants became after issue 100. But my biggest takeaway from talking with him that day was him explaining the hypocrisy of the shirt I was wearing to me. Well, Disney owns Marvel, thereby earning revenue from its intellectual property. Nicieza explained to me that the artists behind the artwork that was used on my shirt were all individually informed that because Disney used less than 33% of their original work in designing that t-shirt, they were not eligible for any financial compensation. Talk about super villains. I met Jim Lee at Coliseum of Comics and got him to autograph a book for me. Jim Lee arrived on my radar in the pages of X-Men with Marvel Comics. And along with the incredible Chris Claremont, Jim launched a new X-book that would go on to sell over 8 million copies worldwide. Don't expect those to be uber valuable with that print count, kids. But value is exactly what Jim Lee and his peers were looking for from Marvel in the 90s. Comic fans know their names, and when they didn't get it, they all left and started their own company, Image Comics, which allowed creator-owned work to grace the pages of all of their books, and it still does to this day. Jim eventually moved on from Image and made his mark at DC Comics, bringing his superior style to Superman, Batman, the Justice League, and the Suicide Squad. After a recent shakeup at DC Comics, Jim Lee now finds himself as the Chief Creative Officer there. Still doing some comic covers on occasion, of course. How's that for super? Hopefully this is just the beginning of my photo ops and the photo gallery I'm making in my comic cave and Star Trek office, which I plan to be my next video, by the way. So Bronze Age believers, when cons and conventions resume, turn that texting machine into a camera and make some memories with the comic creators that are responsible for so many of ours.